From a beet farming survivalist with an obsession over office security to one of the most committed and genuinely terrifying employees in Dunder Mifflin history. This is the complete breakdown of every major form Dwight Kurt Schrute went through. Let's start with his original form, Assistant Regional Manager Dwight. Now, right from the very first episode, it was clear that Dwight Schrute was not a normal human being. He wore the same outfit basically every day, a mustard-colored short-sleeve shirt with a clip-on tie. He carried himself with the kind of absolute confidence that only someone who has genuinely never second-guessed themselves could pull off. His title at Dunder Mifflin was officially Assistant to the Regional Manager. But Dwight refused to acknowledge the word "to the" and simply called himself the Assistant Regional Manager. That is honestly insane when you think about how hard he committed to that distinction for years without any actual authority to back it up. In this base form, Dwight was already operating at a level most people couldn't comprehend. He was consistently the top salesman at the Scranton branch. That is actually pretty impressive considering that he spent a significant portion of every workday monitoring his coworkers, writing formal complaints, attempting to enforce rules that he had largely invented himself. His sales numbers were so strong that Michael Scott kept him around despite the fact that Dwight once tried to get Michael fired in order to take his job. That alone tells you everything you need to know about how valuable Dwight was to that office. He also managed Schrute Farms, a working beet farm and bed and breakfast, entirely on his own while maintaining full-time employment. That is an absolutely crazy amount of productivity for one person. Next up is Dwight and his security and survival expert form. That is something that ran throughout the entire show but really peaked in the earlier seasons. Dwight treated the Dunder Mifflin office as if it were a high-value military installation that needed constant protection from both external threats and internal ones, meaning his coworkers. He kept nunchucks in his desk, a variety of weapons hidden throughout the building. Once constructed an elaborate network of informants to report suspicious behavior to him. He also served as a volunteer sheriff's deputy that he took more seriously than almost anything else in his life aside from the beet farm. In one of his most legendary moments, Dwight started an office fire drill that went so far off the rails that Stanley had an actual heart attack, that Dwight later used as evidence that his emergency preparedness training was necessary. Now let's talk about one of the most underrated aspects of Dwight's character. That is his relationship with Angela Martin. This is where things get genuinely complicated. Angela was the head of the party planning committee and a deeply uptight accountant who shared Dwight's love of rules, tradition, and judging other people. The two of them carried on a secret romantic relationship for years while pretending to have no personal connection whatsoever at work. That took an insane amount of discipline from both of them. Dwight was clearly devoted to Angela in a way that was completely at odds with his cold exterior. He proved this over and over again in ways that were both touching and absolutely bizarre, including once slaughtering her sick cat in what he genuinely believed was an act of mercy and love. Their relationship eventually fell apart when Angela began seeing Andy Bernard. This breakup hit Dwight harder than he ever let on publicly. However, it's important to note that even after the split, Dwight continued to carry out tasks for Angela in secret, including later agreeing to a contract in which he would father her child through artificial means. That is one of the most committed and also deeply strange things any character on this show ever agreed to. The fact that Dwight treated that contract with the same level of seriousness he brought to everything else in his life is exactly what made him such a uniquely unhinged character to watch develop across all 9 seasons. Next up is Dwight's regional manager form. That arrived in season 3 when Michael left temporarily and Dwight was handed control of the branch. And this is where things got absolutely crazy. This was because the moment Dwight had actual authority, he immediately went further than anyone expected. He rearranged the entire office, created a complex merit-based pay system on the spot, had a series of increasingly unhinged confrontations with employees who weren't following his newly established protocols. The power went to his head so fast that corporate had to step in and remove him almost immediately. That was a genuinely funny collapse considering how long he had been building toward that moment. But even in failure, Dwight treated the whole thing as a learning experience rather than a humiliation. That says a lot about his mental fortitude. After losing that temporary position, Dwight entered what you could call his vengeance arc. That spanned a large chunk of the middle seasons. During this period, he created an elaborate alter ego named Recyclops, ran his own competing business called Dwight Schrute's Gym for Muscles out of the office building's basement, launched a failed effort to open a rival paper company. He also briefly joined forces with Charles Minor against Michael. That felt genuinely like a betrayal at the time. Through all of this, Dwight's commitment to self-improvement and total domination over every situation around him never wavered even slightly. That is what made him so compelling to watch even when his plans were falling apart in real time. Now let's cover one of Dwight's most impressive ability unlocks, That was his growth as an actual leader and mentor figure. For most of the show, Dwight had a complicated and openly hostile relationship with Jim Halpert, who spent years pranking him in ways that ranged from mildly annoying to genuinely elaborate. Jim once convinced Dwight that he was turning into a vampire, put his stapler inside a Jell-O mold, impersonated him so accurately that Dwight was forced to question his own identity. But what's interesting is that over time, this rivalry became one of the most genuine friendships on the show, even if neither of them would ever admit it out loud for most of the run. Dwight and Jim's dynamic evolved from pure antagonism into something much more layered by the final seasons. By the time season 8 arrived and the show was operating without Michael Scott, Dwight stepped up in a way that was actually impressive beyond just being funny. He took on more responsibilities, handled difficult clients with a kind of blunt effectiveness that actually worked, started showing real leadership instincts underneath all the theatrics. His application to become regional manager was rejected multiple times over the course of the show for reasons that were completely understandable given his track record. But his persistence was honestly remarkable. He applied, got turned down, kept showing up and doing the job at the same elite sales level regardless. Never really lost the belief that the title was eventually going to be his, which it ultimately was. Let's talk about Dwight's senator arc. This was because this is one of the storylines that showed a different and genuinely darker side of his loyalty. When Angela married State Senator Robert Lipton, Dwight initially seemed to accept the situation, but it became clear over time that the senator was having an affair and that Dwight was quietly furious about the whole thing. The fact that Dwight used his own investigation skills to expose the senator and protect Angela's reputation was one of the more genuinely loyal things he did in the entire run of the show. His reaction to discovering the affair and his decision to confront the senator was carried out with the same level of strategic planning he brought to office security drills. That is absolutely insane, but also completely in character. Around the same time, Dwight was also running Schrute Farms at full capacity and managing it as a legitimate hospitality business that somehow attracted real guests despite offering accommodations that could generously be described as rustic. He hosted murder mystery nights, harvest festivals, a variety of themed events that combined his love of tradition with a completely unique and slightly terrifying approach to customer service. Schrute Farms was a genuine source of income for him and something he was enormously proud of. The fact that he juggled it alongside his full-time sales career and constant office security patrols while also conducting a secret romantic arrangement with Angela is genuinely impressive no matter how you look at it. Next up is Dwight's final and most complete form. That arrived in the series finale when he was officially promoted to regional manager of the Scranton branch that he had been pursuing for 9 years. In this form, Dwight finally had the title, the authority, the respect he had always believed he deserved. His reaction to getting there was one of the most satisfying payoffs in the show. He immediately rehired the entire staff on his own terms, gave Jim and Pam the support they needed to move on with their lives, then married Angela in a ceremony on Schrute Farms with Mose as the officiant. That was exactly the kind of ending that felt completely right for both of them. In this final form, Dwight was essentially the same person he had always been, just now operating with complete institutional authority behind him. He still wore the short-sleeve shirt, still believed in beet farming as a foundational life skill, still maintained a level of workplace intensity that most human beings couldn't sustain for a single afternoon. But there was something genuinely earned about seeing him finally reach the top of the structure he had defended so aggressively for so many years. He had outlasted everyone who doubted him, survived every prank Jim had thrown at him, somehow turned the most chaotic possible career path into a legitimate success story. That is honestly the most Dwight Schrute thing that could have ever happened.